and more. That is the message rising first. And yes, this feels like reality finally hitting someone hard. Not pretend pain, not dramatic pride, real consequence, real emptiness, real ache. This feels like somebody who believed they could handle distance much better than they can. They thought they could sit in silence, watch from afar, delay, drift, and still feel fine. But your absence did not stay soft around them. It became a lesson they could not escape. So let's go ahead and see where you are now in this connection and what your energy is here. Here is the Nine of Pentacles. Beautiful. Your spirit feels more self-held now. There is more dignity around you now, more self-return, more inward steadiness. You may still feel this person, yes, but I do not feel you are revolving around them. I feel you have come back to yourself. That is one reason the title says you won. You won because your energy stopped begging. You won because your center came back online. You won because your value is no longer being negotiated through somebody else's hesitation. And where is this person right now? Here is the Five of Cups. Yes, this person is grieving, and they are grieving something they helped create. They are staring at the emotional space where your warmth used to soften everything for them. They may have thought your care would wait. They may have thought your attention would stay nearby. But now that your energy has shifted, they are being forced to feel what that change means. And what is going on for both of you right now? Here's the Six of Wands. Interesting. I feel this says your self-respect is winning the battle that your heart once lost. Your energy is getting stronger. Your light is returning to you more fully. And meanwhile, the connection is reorganizing around the fact that you are not shrinking anymore. What else for you? Here is dignity. Yes, that fits your whole side perfectly. There is something in you now that would rather be alone than be half chosen. That matters because it means your silence is not emptiness. It is self-protection with wisdom. And for them, here is panic. Wow. Yes, I do feel panic here. Not always outward panic. Sometimes this looks like mental spiraling. Sometimes it looks like checking on you quietly. Sometimes it looks like imagining too much. Sometimes it looks like trying to act normal while their inner world is anything but normal. For both of you, here is consequence. Yes, and that is exactly the word for this. Your absence is not random punishment. It is consequence. It is truth taking form. It is the connection showing them what your presence was actually doing in their life. All right, two cards coming out for you. Here is restraint, and here is poise. Yes, I feel you are holding back on purpose, not because you feel nothing, because you learned you are not spilling all your tenderness where it has not been carried carefully enough. For them, here is craving. Wow, so yes, they are missing everything now. Your attention, your ease, your emotional softness, your familiar energy, and the more unavailable that feels, the more obvious your value becomes to them. For both of you, here is reversal. Yes, the dynamic has flipped. The one who once felt safer now does not. The one who once overextended now does not. And that reversal is exactly what is waking them up. Here is your next energy. Hold your vision. Wow. Okay, let's clarify that. Here is strength. Beautiful. Spirit is saying stay steady, stay rooted, do not wobble now. Because your absence is saying something, it is teaching something, it is clarifying something. So the main energy coming through is this. You won because you stopped losing yourself. You won because you came back into your own life, your own beauty, your own standards, your own peace. And now the person on the other side cannot cope with the reality your absence created. They feel the gap. They feel the silence. They feel the difference between who they had access to and who you are now when you stop feeding the old pattern. That is where this reading begins. With your energy no longer available in the same way, and with their heart learning how powerful that difference really is. Now let's get one more layer here. What is hurting them most about this distance now? Here's the Four of Wands reversed. Yes, they feel the loss of emotional comfort. They feel what is missing in their atmosphere. They feel what changed in the emotional home between you. It is not only missing your words, it is missing your softness, your place. And another here is the Page of Swords. Yes, they are watching more than they admit, trying to read your shifts, trying to understand your silence, trying to work out whether you are done or simply stronger now than they expected. Let's pull back the curtain on their private side, because this next layer is about what they are not saying. What are they hiding right now? What stays behind the face behind the silence, behind the pride. Here is the Page of Swords, the Moon, and the Four of Pentacles. Wow. So the first thing I get is that they are watching far more than they admit, watching your shifts, watching your rhythm, watching for signs of who you are becoming without them nearby. And the Moon says they are not calm while doing that. There is projection here. There is fear here. There is the mind filling in blanks with scenarios that make their chest tighten. And the Four of Pentacles says they are holding all of this inside very tightly. So what they are not saying is this: your absence did not create detachment. It created inward obsession. It created more private focus, not less. What else are they hiding? Here is jealousy. Well, yes, they are bothered by the idea that your energy moves freely now. They are bothered by the idea that someone else could witness your glow more closely. They are bothered by your silence because your silence makes them imagine too much. I do not think they enjoy how reactive this makes them feel, because some part of them wanted to believe they still held an invisible claim. And your energy is proving that your life keeps moving with or without their certainty. That is very hard on them. What else are they hiding? Here is the Seven of Pentacles. Yes, this has been building for a while. This is not brand new. This is not yesterday's panic. They have been sitting with this, reviewing, revisiting, replaying, thinking about what changed, thinking about when the atmosphere shifted, thinking about whether they let something valuable slide too far before realizing its worth. What else is hidden? Here is the King of Cups. Beautiful. So underneath the bruised pride, underneath the mental spiraling, there is real feeling here, deep feeling, stable feeling, feeling they do not show well but carry strongly. And I think one of the hidden truths is this: they do not only miss your attention, they miss what your presence did to their inner world. They miss how your energy softened things in them. They miss what felt warmer, calmer, brighter when you were more emotionally near. Let's get another layer. What are they closest to admitting? Here is the Ace of Cups. Wow, yes, they are closest to admitting that the feeling did not cool when you stepped back. It clarified, it intensified. Your absence did not make your value smaller, it made it brighter against the silence. Here is another, the Two of Wands. So the other thing they are hiding is that they are actively imagining next steps, different approaches, different words, different moments. They are picturing what it would look like to close the gap, or at least try. They are thinking ahead. Not because they are unsure of wanting, because they are trying to build a route between private realization and visible action. What else? Here is the Lovers. Wow, yes. So the deepest hidden truth is this: they know the connection matters. They know it is not casual. They know your absence exposed that. And I think that is why they are not only sad right now. They are altered. Your absence changed the way they understand the bond. Let's get one more. What are they still not fully admitting, even to themselves? Here is the Tower. Yes, they are underestimating how much this has already changed them. They know it matters, but I do not think they fully understand yet how much their old image of control is collapsing under the weight of what they feel now. That is why this part feels so loud inwardly. Not because they are undecided, because they are becoming aware that they are not as detached or as powerful as they once imagined. So the hidden story here is simple. Your absence uncovered their emotional dependence more than they expected. It uncovered how much of your energy they had quietly woven into their own comfort. It uncovered how often they looked for your softness without naming that need. It uncovered how much they assumed they could remain in a half position and still keep your warmth nearby. And now they know that was not true, and that knowledge is doing real work on them. They are more affected than they look, more frightened than they admit, more emotionally committed than they openly say. And the most hidden truth of all is this: they know you are no longer standing in the old place. They know they may have to rise to meet who you are now. And that is exactly why the private layer feels full of pressure, urgency, fear, and attraction all at once. They are hiding a heart that is much louder than their behavior has been. They are hiding the fact that your absence has become a mirror they cannot look away from. And what it shows them is how much they actually wanted your presence in their life. Now, let's turn fully toward your side, because this part belongs to your truth and only your truth. Not what they think, not what they hide, what you feel, what you carry, what has changed in you because of all this. Here is the Queen of Swords, the Star, and the Eight of Cups. Wow, so the first thing I get is that your heart now has boundaries around its tenderness. Not because your love disappeared, because your wisdom arrived. The Queen of Swords says you are thinking more clearly now. The Star says there is still softness in you, still hope, still emotional depth. But the Eight of Cups says you are no longer willing to remain where your soul feels underfed. That is the real shift in your side of this. You may still care, you may still feel the bond, but you are not available for the same old emotional arrangement. What else are you carrying? Here is the Five of Pentacles. Yes, there has been real hurt here, feeling left outside, feeling emotionally unchosen, feeling like your value is understood too late or tested too often. And I think your truth now is that part of you is tired of being the one who feels the depth first. Tired of being the one who has to live on intuition while the other person lives on delay. That exhaustion matters because it changes how you receive them now. Here's another. Justice. Yes, so your side of this is strongly tied to fairness now. You are asking, can they meet the standard this connection now requires? Can they show up consistently? Can they bring truth, stability, and equal effort? Can they make this safe enough for your heart to stop doing all the invisible work? That is a powerful place to be. What else is true for you? Here is the Four of Swords. You want peace. You may still feel emotion. You may still feel the pull, but your nervous system wants relief now. You do not want more chaos just because the bond is strong. And that is important because it means the next chapter cannot only be passionate, it has to be calming too, or some part of you will not trust it fully. What else? Here is the Six of Wands. Yes. So part of your truth now is that you want to feel chosen in a visible way, not implied, not almost, not energetically hoped for from a distance. Chosen, that matters a lot because it tells me your heart has moved past fragments. You want something that can stand in the light. That is a major difference from before. Here's another layer. What are you ready to admit to yourself now? Here is judgment. Wow. Yes, you are ready to stop calling delay mysterious. You are ready to stop mistaking half movement for hidden devotion. You are ready to let truth be simple. Either somebody rises or they do not. That does not mean you do not care. It means you refuse to get lost inside, maybe forever. And I think that inner decision in you is one reason the other side feels so shaken. Now, because your energy no longer reads like endless emotional availability, it reads like a door that still exists, but only for something real. And the deeper truth is this: you are no longer willing to lose yourself to keep a bond alive. You are no longer willing to call suffering loyalty. You still have feeling, but your feeling now stands beside self-respect. And that changes the whole reading because it means if they come in, they are not meeting the older version of you. They are meeting the version of you that learned through ache and came back into herself clearer and stronger. That is your side now, still soft, still intuitive, still capable of deep love, but far more anchored, far more clear about what cannot continue. And I think that clarity is exactly what their soul is reacting to so strongly at this moment. Because your absence is not only distance, it is a declaration now. It says your heart is not free for confusion anymore. It says your care is no longer available for misuse. It says if somebody wants access now, they need to arrive with something steadier than longing. That is why this change in you matters so much. It is not cruelty. It is maturity. It is what happens when love stops kneeling before uncertainty and stands up inside itself. And I think your heart needed that, not to become harder, to become truer, to become safer for you to live inside. What else are you carrying? Here is the Six of Cups. Yes, there is still memory here. Sweetness your heart cannot deny, but memory is not enough for you now. And that distinction matters. You are not erasing what was beautiful. You are refusing to let beauty excuse neglect. And another layer. What do you need most, if anything, is to move again? Here is temperance. Yes, you need calm pacing, honesty. Steadier rhythm, not a dramatic rush, not a flood that disappears. Something that lets your heart breathe instead of forcing it backward. It is cleaner now, and you know the difference. Now let's look at the blocks and complications, because this is where the reading has to get very honest. Why this stalled, why your absence became necessary. Here is the Four of Swords, the Five of Swords, and the Devil. Wow. So the first thing I get is that delay became a pattern here. The Four of Swords says this person paused instead of acted, kept thinking instead of moving. kept waiting for a better moment, but the Five of Swords says there was ego woven into that waiting too, wanting to protect image, wanting to avoid looking too vulnerable, wanting to stay in control while still hoping the bond would somehow survive untouched. And the Devil says those habits hardened into something harmful for the connection. So one block is very clear. They did not only hesitate, they clung to habits that made hesitation feel safer than honesty. What else was blocking this? Here is the Seven of Cups. Yes, too many imagined outcomes, too many mental versions, too many possible futures running through their mind at once. I feel this person spent a lot of time thinking around the connection instead of into it, and the longer they did that, the more the bond lived in emotional weather instead of in structure. That became a complication by itself. What else? Here is shame, yes. Shame is a real block here because at some point they started realizing they were mishandling something valuable. And instead of immediately correcting it, some part of them froze harder. Because once someone knows they should have acted differently, they often avoid the very conversation that would begin repair. That is important because it means the problem was not lack of feeling. The problem was inability to move cleanly once feeling demanded courage. What else blocked this? Here is the Hierophant reversed. Yes. Resistance to doing things properly, resistance to choosing a clear lane, resistance to stepping into a more mature form of relating. I do feel there was avoidance of seriousness, not because they wanted nothing, sometimes because they wanted a lot and feared the weight of it, and that creates one of the hardest blocks of all. Wanting depth but resisting the responsibility depth asks for. What was your block here? Here is justice. Yes, your block was wisdom. Your block was fairness. Some part of you knew that wanting them could not replace stability. Some part of you knew that longing alone would not build safety. So your distance was not only reaction, it was correction. It was the soul saying this dynamic cannot keep feeding on me like this. That matters because it means the block between you is not only that they delayed, it is also that you evolved. You became less willing to accept the old emotional arrangement. Let's get one more layer. What has to end now? If anything real is going to begin, here is death. Yes, the old version of the bond has to die. The old waiting, the old almost, the old silence, the old assumption that your heart would simply remain available. None of that can survive if this is going to become healthier. And I think that is the deepest complication of all. What they want may be sincere now, but sincerity has to enter a field that already outgrew the old pattern. So if they come towards you, it cannot be in the same emotional shape as before. It has to be cleaner, more adult, more honest, more accountable, more consistent because the soul of the connection already knows the previous structure failed. Now the people inside it have to catch up to that truth. Let's pull another card here. What humbles them most about your absence? Here is the Five of Cups. Yes, that it became the consequence, not a threat, not a performance, the consequence. And they cannot charm their way around consequence. They have to feel it. That is what is changing them. And another, what makes you stay back now? Here is the Queen of Swords. Yes, because you see too clearly to pretend. You know what the old pattern felt like, and your spirit will not willingly re-enter it unchanged? That is the block map, their delay. Your awakening, their pride, your self-respect, their fantasy, your reality. And until those lines are crossed, honestly, the connection cannot fully reopen. That is why this is hard, but it is also why change is finally being forced. Now, the old way has no life left. The old language has no power left. The block was also comfort with half closeness, enough feeling to stay attached. Not enough bravery to build. And that kind of middle space always turns into pain eventually. That is what happened here, and why your absence became necessary. Now the truth demands more. Now let's look at what shifts next, because this is where the reading has to move forward. What actually changes next? What starts happening after all of this pressure? Here is the Chariot, the Page of Cups, and the Ace of Swords. Wow. So the first thing I get is movement after too much circling. The Chariot says they cannot sit in indecision forever now. The Page of Cups says the first move comes through something softer than before, not perfect but sincere, human, heartfelt. And the Ace of Swords says the shift comes through truth, so I do not feel the next movement is vague. I feel it happens because inner realization finally becomes outer expression. What else shifts next? Here's the Eight of Wands. Yes, pace changes. Energy begins traveling faster. What felt slow starts moving. What felt stuck starts speaking. I feel this could be contact, a message, or some kind of conversation that changes the rhythm between you and makes the silence impossible to pretend through anymore. What is the first emotional shift in them? Here is relief, yes. I think once they begin moving, some of their internal pressure lifts. Not all of it, because consequences still remain, but there is relief in no longer fighting themselves every second. What is the first emotional shift in you? Here is guardedness easing. Yes, not disappearing, but easing. Because once there is something real in front of you, your heart no longer has to survive only on interpretation. You can listen, you can feel, you can decide from something visible. That changes everything. What else shifts next? Here is the Knight of Pentacles. Beautiful. So there is potential for a steadier pace after the first opening. That is important because this should not become one emotional burst followed by another long retreat. The healthier version of this next movement would be something that continues after it starts. That is what this card shows me. What does the next step sound like? Here is confession. Wow, yes, I do feel they say more than you expected, or say it more plainly than before. There is admission here. There is clarity here, and maybe most importantly, there is intent here. What does this change in your connection dynamic? Here is the Magician. Yes, possibility becomes active. The bond stops being only emotional weather and starts becoming something that can be shaped by actual choices. That is huge because it means the story moves from passive longing into creation. What do they most want the next step to do? Here is the Ten of Cups. They want to restore harmony. They want to move toward something that feels emotionally whole instead of fractured. That is the direction in their heart. What do you most need to see in the next step? Here is the Six of Pentacles. Yes, reciprocity, balance, equal energy. You need to see that this is not only a release for them, it has to become care for you too. Otherwise, it is incomplete. Let's get one more card. Here's the World. Beautiful. So yes, I do feel the next movement closes one cycle and begins another. The chapter of silent certainty ends. The chapter of visible certainty begins, and that is a major shift all by itself. The connection stops living under the old rules. The delay rule breaks. The uncertainty rule weakens. The fantasy only rule ends. Now something crosses into form. And that is why I feel the next phase may feel both emotional and strange. Because once something long carried in private finally takes shape in the outer world, the emotional atmosphere reorganizes very quickly. Let's get one more detail. How will you know the shift is real? Here is the King of Pentacles. You will know because the energy feels more grounded, less slippery, less performative, more adult, more present. Something that can remain in the room. And I think that is your sign. Not only that they speak, but that what they say has weight behind it. That is the shift here. Private certainty turns into outward movement. And once that happens, the connection is no longer suspended in the same way. What changes first in their body? Here is strength. Yes, they stop fighting themselves so hard. That inner resistance starts breaking. What changes first in your field? Here is the Star. Your energy can finally relax a little because something real has entered the room. And another, what keeps the movement from fading? Here is Temperance, calm pacing, repeated sincerity, emotional balance. Not only one brave moment and a steadier rhythm after the brave moment. Now let's close this out because this is where the reading needs to land clearly. What does this mean? What are you meant to do with it from here? Here's the Ten of Cups, the Queen of Swords, and the Star. Beautiful. So the first thing I get is that your heart is still allowed to want something good, still allowed to want something whole. The Queen of Swords says you are also not wrong for requiring truth, fairness, and directness. And the Star says healing is possible here, but healing does not mean you erase what happened and call that peace. It means you let truth and softness exist in the same room. That is your advice. Do not choose between heart and clarity. Keep both. What is the final message from their heart? Here is the King of Cups. Wow. Yes, the final message is that the feeling is real, but it has been trapped behind fear, pride, timing, and poor choices. And I feel they know that now. What would they say if no fear were left? I should have done this sooner. I should have said this sooner. I should have made this clear sooner. Wow. Yes, that feels very clean. Here's another. I know I cannot ask for your softness without bringing you something honest. Yes, and that matters because it shows they are beginning to understand the standard now. Here is another. I want what I already know in private to exist with you in the open, beautiful. That feels like one of the strongest closing lines here because it tells me this is not about almost anymore. It is about whether private certainty is finally willing to stand in public truth. What is the highest potential here if both of you honor what this bond is asking for? Here is the Two of Cups and the Hierophant. Beautiful, that says mutual recognition can become something more structured. Not instantly, not magically, but with real seriousness, real care, and real intention. That matters because it means the connection is not doomed to stay in emotional weather forever. It can move towards shape, but only if truth keeps leading. What is the warning? Here is the Seven of Swords. Yes, the warning is this. Do not accept half truth because it feels emotional. Do not accept symbolic gestures if what your heart actually needs is clarity and consistency. This does not mean be cold, it means keep your eyes open. What are you most meant to remember? Here is the Empress. Your value did not decrease because someone took too long. Your beauty did not fade because someone hesitated. Your heart did not become less sacred because another person failed to handle it carefully enough. That is one of the deepest messages here. You are still whole. You are still worthy. And the right future for you will never require you to shrink your standards in order to keep it alive. Let's get one final oracle card. Here is revelation. Wow. And here's another response. Beautiful. So I feel the closing energy is very simple. Something hidden becomes known. Then your heart gets to respond from clarity, not from hope alone, not from fear alone, from clarity. And that is a completely different place to stand. So the final message I am getting is this. They have already decided to do this. They already know what they want in their heart. The only thing they have been wrestling with is how to cross the distance and say it, but I do not feel that wrestling lasts forever. Now, I feel the pressure has become too strong because this is not the beginning of a feeling. This is the beginning of an action. Let the next move show you whether what they already decided inwardly is something they are actually ready to live outwardly. And if they are, you will feel the difference. True effort lands differently. It carries weight. It does not ask your intuition to do all the work alone anymore. And that is the closing truth. The next chapter begins when private decision becomes visible action. That is the next truth here. Not fantasy, not waiting. Private decision becomes visible behavior, and visible behavior is what your heart needs now. If they are ready, the difference will be felt quickly. If they are not, clarity will show that too. That is the gift here. You do not have to stay in guessing forever. The next move will speak in a language your whole heart can finally hear clearly. What is your clearest advice now? Here is the Nine of Pentacles. Stay in your own steadiness. Stay in your self-respect. Do not collapse inward just because this person is finally moving. Let them come toward the version of you that learned something through all of this. Let them meet the version of you that does not need to chase to be chosen. And another, what matters most after truth arrives. Here is temperance balance, pacing emotional honesty, one revealing moment and consistency after it. That is the ending here. Truth approaches and your heart gets to choose from clarity. What does this mean? What are you meant to do with it from here? Here's the Ten of Cups, the Queen of Swords, and the Star. Beautiful. So the first thing I get is that your heart is still allowed to want something good, still allowed to want something whole. The Queen of Swords says you are also not wrong for requiring truth, fairness, and directness. And the Star says healing is possible here, but healing does not mean you erase what happened and call that peace. It means you let truth and softness exist in the same room. That is your advice. Do not choose between heart and clarity. Keep both. What is the final message from their heart? Here is the King of Cups. Wow. Yes, the final message is that the feeling is real, but it has been trapped behind fear, pride, timing, and poor choices. And I feel they know that now. What would they say if no fear were left? I should have done this sooner. I should have said this sooner. I should have made this clear sooner. Wow. Yes, that feels very clean. Here's another. I know I cannot ask for your softness without bringing you something honest. Yes, and that matters because it shows they are beginning to understand the standard now. Here is another. I want what I already know in private to exist with you in the open, beautiful. That feels like one of the strongest closing lines here, because it tells me this is not about almost anymore. It is about whether private certainty is finally willing to stand in public truth. What is the highest potential here if both of you honor what this bond is asking for? Here is the Two of Cups and the Hierophant. Beautiful, that says mutual recognition can become something more structured. Not instantly, not magically, but with real seriousness, real care, and real intention. That matters because it means the connection is not doomed to stay in emotional weather forever. It can move toward shape, but only if truth keeps leading. What is the warning? Here is the Seven of Swords. Yes, the warning is this. Do not accept half-truth because it feels emotional. Do not accept symbolic gestures if what your heart actually needs is clarity and consistency. This does not mean be cold. It means keep your eyes open. What are you most meant to remember? Here is the Empress. Your value did not decrease because someone took too long. Your beauty did not fade because someone hesitated. Your heart did not become less sacred because another person failed to handle it carefully enough. That is one of the deepest messages here. You are still whole. You are still worthy. And the right future for you will never require you to shrink your standards in order to keep it alive. Let's get one final oracle card. Here is Revelation. Wow. And here's another response. Beautiful. So I feel the closing energy is very simple. Something hidden becomes known. Then your heart gets to respond from clarity, not from hope alone, not from fear alone, from clarity. And that is a completely different place to stand. So the final message I am getting is this. They have already decided to do this. They already know what they want in their heart. The only thing they have been wrestling with is how to cross the distance and say it. But I do not feel that wrestling lasts forever. Now, I feel the pressure has become too strong because this is not the beginning of a feeling. This is the beginning of an action. Let the next move show you whether what they already decided inwardly is something they are actually ready to live outwardly. And if they are, you will feel the difference. True effort lands differently. It carries weight. It does not ask your intuition to do all the work alone anymore. And that is the closing truth. The next chapter begins when private decision becomes visible action. That is the next truth here. Not fantasy, not waiting. Private decision becomes visible behavior, and visible behavior is what your heart needs now. If they are ready, the difference will be felt quickly. If they are not, clarity will show that too. That is the gift here. You do not have to stay in guessing forever. The next move will speak in a language your whole heart can finally hear clearly. What is your clearest advice now? Here is the Nine of Pentacles. Stay in your own steadiness. Stay in your self-respect. Do not collapse inward just because this person is finally moving. Let them come toward the version of you that learned something through all of this. Let them meet the version of you that does not need to chase to be chosen. And another, what matters most after truth arrives. Here is temperance balance. Pacing emotional honesty, one revealing moment and consistency after it. That is the ending here. Truth